see. I want to start today with something that I think is one of the most annoying, maddening, I don't even know what word to describe it, parts of being an actor. It's what when I describe this to people who are not actors, they're like, "What? How do you deal with this?" And that is the fact that we get no feedback. You submit for something and you don't hear back, or your agent submits for something and doesn't hear back. You tape for something, you don't hear back. You meet with an agent, you don't hear back. You audition for a role you really wanted and you don't hear back. And this keeps happening over and over across months, sometimes across years. And at no point does anybody ever stop and say, here is the specific reason why this didn't work. Here's the specific reason why we didn't move forward with you for this. Here's the specific reason why you weren't a good fit for this. There's no feedback loop. There's no email that says, oh, well, your tape was actually great, but we just went with someone with more credits. Or the producer had a cousin who they really wanted to get in there. Or, the rep doesn't say, I really loved your materials, but couldn't really figure out how to pitch you. Or there's someone else on our roster that's really similar or whatever. Nobody sends you a note that says you were close, but this one thing just was a little off. It's just silence. And in that silence, your brain is going to do what every brain does. It's going to fill in the blanks. And what it usually fills in is some version of something must be wrong with me and I don't know what it is and nobody's going to tell me and I'm just going to keep guessing forever. Clip that. This is what I call the feedback blackout. And it's one of the most expensive experiences an actor can live in for a long time without realizing how much it's costing them. Today, we're going to talk about why the industry is set up this way. It's not like out to get you. It's just the way it is. And we're going to talk about why. And why nobody's going to come rescue you with a clear answer or clear feedback. But the good news is that you don't actually need them to. There's a way to diagnose what's happening in your career with pretty good accuracy, using some tools, using some patterns, using some signals that are already available to you when you know where to look for them. This is episode 12 of Powerhouse Conversations, the feedback blackout, why actors almost never get told what's actually wrong and how to diagnose it yourself. So let's get into it. Let me just bring up my notes. So before we dive in, I want to tell you what today is and what it's not going to be. Today is not going to be a conversation where I tell you to stop caring about feedback and just trust yourself, because that's not actually helpful. You need information to make smart decisions about your career, and pretending you don't is just wasting a lot of time. Today is also not going to be a conversation where I villainize casting directors and agents for not giving us more feedback. It's practical, it's structural. And when we understand why, we can start to work around it and stop expecting it, stop asking for it. What today is a two-part conversation. In the first part, I'm going to explain why the feedback blackout exists and why it's not going anywhere. And the second part, which is the more useful part, I think, for us, is I'm going to walk you through the process that I use with actors I work with to figure out what's going on in your career without actually needing anyone to tell you. So you'll leave here with questions that you can actually answer about your own situation and figure out what's going on. Okay? So let's talk first about why this blackout exists. This is not personal at all. And a lot of the pain of it comes from personalizing it for ourselves. And it's almost never personal. It's just not. So there are three main reasons here. The first reason is just volume. A casting director working on a single episode of TV or streaming might get 500 to 2,000 submissions for a co-star role. For a bigger role, it might even be more. Like, if they gave specific feedback to every actor whose tape they passed on or whose submission they passed on, they would literally never get anything done. They would spend their entire day writing feedback emails. So the structure of their job does not actually allow for it. So just remember, the silence is not about you. It's just like a math problem. Okay. The second reason is, I'll say, like legal and professional risk. Giving honest feedback about why someone wasn't cast opens up very complicated conversations that most people have been trained to avoid. Like, what are they going to say? Your look wasn't what we wanted? That can be misinterpreted. Your tape felt off? That can be argued with. We went another direction is just like it's just safer. Their job is to cast the project, to move on, not to manage the emotional reactions of every actor who didn't book it. And the third reason is one that I think is the most important, and that is that when you do get feedback, it's not like a reliable indicator of something that you need to change. The casting director is only seeing a small part of the picture here. They don't know how your agent pitched you. They don't know what your other materials look like. They don't know the context you're in. So even when they do give feedback, it's about one narrow slice of the whole situation. And when you get that feedback and you treat it like a full big diagnosis, you often end up making changes that don't fix an underlying issue. So the feedback blackout is not a personal failing. It's a structural thing with the industry. And waiting for someone to give you an answer to dig you out of this is one of the fastest ways to stay stuck. Clip that. So the good news here is that the information that you want and that you need is already available to you. It's just in a form that not a lot of people know how to read. So let's get into that. It took me a while to fully understand this about this industry. We're getting feedback all the time. Constant feedback, a steady stream of signals about how we're being perceived, about where we're being placed, about what rooms we're being considered for, what's actually working and what's not working. But it's not the kind of feedback that most of us are looking for. It's not written down in an email that says, here is what to fix. It's not handed to you on a silver platter. It's coded into patterns. And once you learn to read those patterns, you have more useful information than any single piece of feedback handed to you on a platter could ever give you. Clip that. I want you to think about your career for a moment as a system that is running and producing outputs. Those outputs are the data. And the question is whether you're paying attention to the right outputs and interpreting them correctly. The outputs are things like how many submissions are being sent out on your behalf, or how many submissions are you making if you're not represented? Which casting directors are seeing your name? Which ones are calling you in? Which ones are not? What kinds of roles are you being submitted for versus what you want to be submitted for, or what actually fits you? What's your booking ratio? Who's booking the roles you didn't get? What are your materials actually communicating to someone who's seeing them for the first time? How is your positioning being read in the rooms where it matters? All of that is information. All of that is feedback, and almost none of it requires anyone to tell you what's up. What actors are usually doing in this feedback blackout is they're sitting and waiting for someone to interpret this data for them. They want their agent to call and tell them, hey, here's what's happening, here's what's going on, or that the casting director will give them a note or something, or, and meanwhile, the data is sitting right there, uninterpreted. So I'm going to teach you today how to read that story yourself, because once you can, this feedback blackout loses a lot of its power. We stop waiting for someone to save us and we start actually running our careers. So I'm going to walk you through the 3 specific places where data is sitting right now And each one tells you something a little bit different about what's happening, but together they give you a really clear picture of where the actual gap is for you. So the first place is your talent submission report. And this is a bit of a controversial thing. A lot of people think that we should not bother to look at our talent submission report. We shouldn't bother to ask for it, whatever. You can request it from your agent or manager. You can also request it from a casting service that you're using if you're submitting yourself. It will show you exactly how often you're being submitted, for what roles, by which casting directors, and what the result was. Now, this document is a gold mine. Some people will say, well, big actors aren't asking for talent submission reports. Well, if things are working great, I haven't asked for a talent submission report in a very long time, but if I was in a place where I wanted more data, this is a worthwhile ask. Now, I want to talk about how to ask for this, because this is also where a lot of actors get tripped up. They worry that asking for this report is going to make them seem like they're checking up on their rep, or that they're implying that their rep is not submitting them enough, or that they're going to damage this relationship in some way. And here is how you frame it. We're not checking up on our rep. This is not what we're doing at all. You tell your rep you're doing some work on your career strategy, and you want to look at the data so that you can figure out what you can do on your end to support the team's efforts. You make it about you. It's not about them. So you're going to say something like, I'm working on strengthening my marketing and outreach strategy, and it would really help me to see a submission report for the last 6 months so I can see which casting directors I should be building relationships with and whether there are any patterns that I should be aware of. That's it. It's not about checking to see if you're really submitting me. It's not it at all. Once you have the report, here's what you're going to look for. I'm going to give you 5 specific questions to ask. Question number 1, how often are you actually being submitted? Over a 6-month period, this tells you a lot. If you're being submitted very few times, that's one kind of problem. That might mean your rep doesn't have a clear sense of your casting, or they don't see enough opportunities for your type, or maybe they're not prioritizing you. If you're being submitted a lot, but you're not being called in, that's a completely different problem. That means something about how you're being presented is not landing. Something about your materials is not landing. Question 2, what level of roles are you being submitted for? This is important because sometimes your rep has a different idea of your casting than you do, or maybe you're trying to move up to guest star and you're only being submitted for co-stars or whatever. The third question is, what casting directors are seeing your name regularly and not calling you in? And this is one of the most useful questions you can ask, because it gives you a specific list of people to build relationships with. If the same casting director is seeing your submission over and over and over and never calling you in, that's a relationship that you need to cultivate in other ways. Them seeing a tiny thumbnail on Breakdown Services is not going to help. They're obviously casting shows that you're right for, or your rep wouldn't keep submitting you to them, but something about your positioning is not making you a clear yes for them. So that is something you can act on. Clip that. Question 4, what's your audition per submission ratio? This is your own private metric. You don't compare it to anyone else. You just watch it over time. If you're getting 1 audition for every 100 submissions, the goal is to get that number down and keep improving. And this is just a really clear measure of whether your materials and your positioning are working. And when it starts to move in a better direction, that means something is working. Question 5, and I say this with a caveat. Who eventually booked the roles that you didn't? And this can feel like a weird stalking of people who got the parts that you wanted, but I promise it can be useful. Look up the actor who booked the role, see who their reps are, take a look at their materials, their credits, their positioning. Sometimes you can learn something real about how you were being perceived in relation to the role. Sometimes you'll see that they're in a completely different category and you were never really in contention there, or whatever. But sometimes they're right next to you in type, and you'll start to see what they have that you don't. But either way, it's information. Take it with a grain of salt. Do not ruminate over this at all. Okay. But this submission data will, along with these 5 questions, will tell you more about what's actually happening in your career than a year of just guessing about it. Clip that. The second place the data is sitting is in your materials, but not the way you look at them, the way other people look at them. Here's the thing about your own materials. You've been looking at them for so long and with so much personal investment that you literally cannot see them clearly anymore. You know what you meant when you choose that headshot. You know what you're really supposed to communicate. You know the context of every credit on your resume. And that knowledge is the problem. You know too much. The casting director looking at your materials for the first time has none of that context. They're seeing what's actually on the page, not what you intended. The gap between what you meant and what actually comes across is where a lot of careers will stall. And the fix for this is something that I teach inside my community. It's one of the most underutilized tools in an actor's kind of like arsenal of diagnostic tools, I think, and that's a feedback audit. So I'm going to walk you through how to do it really quickly. Reach out to 6 people. At least 3 of them should be in the industry. Casting directors you've worked with, agents who know you, a coach whose opinion you trust, other actors who are further along than you, whose judgment you respect, right? And the other 3 people can be people who are not in the industry at all, people who don't know anything about how all this works. And I would say have a little mix of both, because industry people are going to tell you how your materials read professionally, and non-industry people will tell you what impression your materials are creating in someone with no context. And they tell you different things, but both are useful somewhat, right? Send them a link to your casting profile and ask them, does anything stand out to you? Based on what you see here, what 3 TV shows, films, plays could you see me in? Right? And this is really helpful because this tells the story that your materials are telling, not what they think, not what you think they're telling, right? If 3 people come back and say, ooh, I see you in a legal drama, then that's very clear. If somebody says a teen comedy, somebody says a period drama, and somebody says a horror film, then it's like, what's happening here? That's incoherent. 3, what do you like most about what you see here? 4, what feels confusing or unclear to you? And 5, if you could change or improve one thing, what would it be? Now, the magic of this is that when you ask several different people, you might see some patterns, right? If one person says something that's just out of left field, you can disregard that. We're looking for patterns here. And here's the part that I want to just say out loud. If you feel weird about reaching out.
All right, friends, that bell marks the end of our sprint. Take the next 10 seconds to.
I'm going to say that again. If you feel weird about reaching out and asking for that feedback, that feeling is something that we need to pay attention to, because these are the materials that are being used on your behalf every single day to decide whether to call you in. And if you're embarrassed to show them to people that you know, that's a signal. Something on those profiles is not serving you, and you already know it at some level. So maybe it's time to take it off. Maybe it's time to make an adjustment, right? Let's not pretend that this stuff is not out there in the world. Clip that. The third place that a lot of data is going to be sitting is in your own history, specifically in patterns across what you've actually booked, what you've gotten close to, all that stuff. So most of us are looking at our bookings as like this random handful of like, yay, wins, but we need to be looking at them as data. And not only your bookings, also the callbacks, the producer sessions, the pins, the avails, like all those roles that you almost got, all of that contains a story about where the industry actually sees you right now. So take a look at your history for the last 3 to 5 years or so, and not just the bookings, all of it. Bookings, callbacks, producer sessions, auditions that went well, things that you did get feedback on, maybe. Write them down and then ask yourself a few questions. Number one is, what kinds of roles am I actually getting close to? Not what I want to be getting close to, but what am I actually in contention for when I'm in contention? Is there a pattern and type of character, the tone of the project, the size of the role, the genre? When I book, what am I booking? Is there a common thread? When I get close and I don't book, is there a pattern there? This exercise is really powerful because it shows you where your current positioning actually lives, regardless of what you want it to be. If you're fighting to be seen for something that's actually 3 steps away from where you currently are, and you have no idea, that's important. We can't stay focused on the goal without looking at the data. That is a recipe for huge frustration. But when you can see clearly where you're actually landing, you can make one of two decisions. You can lean into that really deliberately and build it out because it's where the industry is already responding to you, or you can make a strategic plan to bridge from where you are to where you want to be, which is a different kind of work than just keep submitting and hoping that something changes. Either way, you're working with reality instead of a fantasy. And that's always a better place to start. Clip that. So if you have questions about this, go ahead and comment on whatever platform you're watching this on. But I just want to say, if all 3 of those feel like a lot, you don't have to do all 3 this week. Pick one, start there, right? Start by asking for a submission report or doing a materials audit if you're self-submitting, or doing a booking pattern analysis if you already have a few years of data to look at. Choose the one that's most relevant for you. Now, I want to take a minute to talk about something that I see happen a lot when actors try to do this diagnostic kind of work. They get really excited, they learn about it, then they start and they stop, and they can't really explain why. And what I've come to understand is that there's an emotional reason why this work is hard. And it doesn't have anything to do with being lazy or not being serious about your career. It has to do with the fact that as long as you don't know what the real issue is, you get to keep hoping that it's something that is external, something that you can't control, something that you can't do anything about, something that one day is going to magically shift. The moment you start doing this work, you might find out something specific. And once you know something specific, you got to do something about it. You can't keep telling yourself the general story of, I don't know what's wrong. You have to pick the thing and actually work on it. And that's a different kind of responsibility than most actors are used to. Most actors are carrying the responsibility of working hard, trying everything, staying positive, not giving up. And that is somewhat passive. The responsibility that I'm describing is different. It's the responsibility of really looking at your own situation. And even when what you learn is uncomfortable, you're making deliberate, strategic choices instead of just waiting and grinding forward. So if you are feeling resistance to this work, that resistance is not a sign that you shouldn't do it. It's actually a sign that this is the kind of work that's going to move you forward. Because the reason we resist it is that it takes us out of this comfortable place and into that scary place of actually changing our careers. So when you are willing to push through that resistance and do this anyway, and you're not going to feel ready. Believe me, you're never going to feel ready. But when you do it anyway, trust me, you'll be happy you did. In a few months, you'll be happy you did. So for actors in this conversation who are ready to step out of that feedback blackout and start actually diagnosing their situation more clearly, there are a couple ways we can work together when you're ready. One is the table. The table is my year-long coaching community for actors who are done guessing, who are ready to do the diagnostic work together, who are ready to audit their materials, who are ready to look at patterns and map out where you are versus where you want to be. And we build a plan to bridge from one to the other. This is strategic, personalized work. This is not craft. This is the business layer above the craft where the actual career decisions get made. So if you want help reading this data correctly, this is where that happens. And then there's also Agent Alchemy. Agent Alchemy is my 44-day program for actors who are ready to find aligned representation. So if this is specifically around reps for you, whether you're trying to find one or you feel like you're stuck with one that's not working for you, this gives you a real path through that. So both are going to be linked in the YouTube description. So take a look when you're ready. Now I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to take a look and see if we have any questions. And hey, y'all. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in. And if you comment questions, I will answer those as well if you're watching the replay of this. I know it's a lot to take in. But here's what I want to leave you with today. The feedback blackout is real. It's not going away. The industry is not suddenly going to start giving us direct, actionable feedback about why things aren't working. That's not how it's set up. And waiting for it to do that is a career killer. It's a waste of time. But we don't need the industry to tell us. The information we need is there. It's sitting in the data. It's sitting in the patterns. It's sitting in all of these sources, these 3 sources that I mentioned to you. Once you learn how to read them, you stop being dependent on other people to tell you what's wrong. So this week, pick one, just one. Pick the one that you think is going to give you the most useful information and do that one thing. Because the actors who move forward are not the ones who try to do everything at once. None of us have time for that. They're the ones who pick one thing, look at it clearly, and then act on what they find. This feedback blackout has kept a lot of very talented people very stuck for years, but that doesn't have to be you. You already have more information than you think you do. You just need to look at it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.